fear. This year, my manifesto is discipline is destiny.
Everybody, what is good? It is your boy Chris. Welcome back, everybody. I have a special guest who's been on the show before, who's very instrumental in everything that I've accomplished over the years. I started following him in the beginning of my bodybuilding journey. We have become great friends over the years, and I am honored to have Mr. Robert Sikes, aka Keto Savage, back on the show. Rob, thank you so much for coming on board.
Hey, man, pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you again, man.
Thank you. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know, Rob has a book out called Ketogenic Bodybuilding. I should have had it up and ready. You can get it on Amazon, or you can even go to ketosavage.com. You still have it on your website?
Yeah, it's ketogenicbodybuilding.com, but it links to Amazon.
Okay.
So, yeah.
There you go. Guys, a great book. It's a wealth of information. Almost putting out too much information because then you you might not want you get all the stuff that he would give you as his coach too. So it's good stuff. Yeah. Since we last talked, you had a baby on the way as far as on the YouTube channel, but now you have your child. So what's that been like being a daddy?
Has it really been 11 months since we talked last?
I think as far as on the YouTube channel, it's been that long. I mean, you and I talk all the time, but as far as being on the show, I want to say it was before Rigel was born. I'm almost positive. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome, man. Like Rigel is the best ever. Like I love him to pieces. Totally changed. I mean, everybody that has a kid, like before you have a kid, everybody tells you it's going to change your world. They tell you all these things like, yeah, I get it. But when you have a kid, you're like, man, this really has changed my world. So he is the best. I love him to pieces. My whole world revolves around him for sure.
Outstanding. So what changes have you had to make? I know for me, just a second ago when we were talking beforehand, when I started bodybuilding, I was, I was a lot older. I was already in my 40s, but my kids were already grown. So that whole thing of I don't have time because I'm a parent or whatever, I couldn't use that as one of my excuses. You have a child now. You're also still a businessman. So you're burning your candle at both ends and even in the middle a little bit. What are some of the changes you've had to do to still fit bodybuilding into your life?
Mostly I just train early. Like at the end of the day, that's the only time that really works for me. Because like he's typically sleeping in the early morning. Crystal's trying to get some sleep. He's totally sporadic when it comes to when he sleeps, when he's awake, when he's napping throughout the day. So if I go to the gym first thing in the morning, that's my best bet to have an uninterrupted workout. And Crystal's amazing. Like she feels most of all of that, lack of consistency when it comes to having him. So I pretty much work out at the same time every day, but it's really early in the morning before they're awake. So that's worked out really well for me. But honestly, man, just having him, there's just kind of a wild card component to it. So like we were at KetoCon conference this past weekend. We were on the floor the entire time. We were working the booth. I was speaking, and we have an 11-month-old with us. So it just makes things much more challenging. If I was a single parent, I have no idea what I would do, brother. But since I've got her to kind of pretty much be the ringleader with regards to wrangling him, my life has certainly changed, but I've been able to just reallocate my resources, my time, and how I kind of block things together. So I've still been able to get everything in quite well.
Outstanding. I know some of the things that I talk to a lot of people that, want to get, even if they're not necessarily wanting to be a bodybuilder per se, as far as competing, but they do want to get into great shape. One of the things is, look, I got, young children, not even, teenagers are one thing, especially if they can drive themselves places. That really frees up some time. But it really sounds like it's got to be something you have to want first. And then also you just got to find a way to make the time. And that might include waking up earlier, things like that. Now, you're getting into your health. Last time on your channel, you mentioned that you're on your Instagram channel and on your YouTube, you're talking about how you're in contest prep. So how is that going for you right now, especially now that being a dad and a businessman?
It's good, man. So I started prep on April 3rd, and it is now, I don't know when this podcast goes live, but it's now the 26th. So this is the start of my 4th week into prep. I've been very gradual with my drop in calories. My macros are dialed in. I've been Crystal, my wife, has been meal prepping for me, and I've been hitting those meals, eating those meals without fail. So I have not deviated. I will not deviate. And my training has been on point. I haven't really started cardio yet. I've done one cardio session thus far, and everything's been solid, man. Like my weight is continuing to drop. I'm ahead of schedule as far as what my weight needs to be at this point, and my energy levels have been great. I'm a little bit hungry, but nothing that's hard to manage at all. And I just continue to get leaner and leaner week after week without having dropped many calories at all. So I'm definitely off to a good start as far as the prep is concerned.
Okay, my favorite word to hear, or my favorite phrase, is that you don't have to drop calories too much. Because for me, the hardest part, probably for everybody or most people, contest prep, the hardest part is where you're dialing it into just you're hungry all the time. Your meals basically are just enough to pacify you for 20 minutes, and then you're starving all over again. Walk us through, what's your macronutrient profile right now?
So I started with an 80% fat ratio. So I start with a very high percentage of my calories coming from dietary fat. So lower protein, higher fat, and then obviously very low total carbs, like 10, 15 grams total carbs a day. And then each week I have increased my fat or increased my protein by about 5 grams and dropped my fat by about 10 grams. So still an overall drop in total calories, but an increase in protein week after week for these past few weeks. I'm kind of been playing around with my meal timing, but what I've been doing here lately is just I'll wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock, work for a few hours, go train, have my first meal, which is a whole keto brick, normally around 10 o'clock in the morning. And then I've been doing the chocolate peanut butter cup brick. So the, fat and calories and protein in that. And then I have my second and final meal, which has been ground beef, eggs, and smoked mackerel. And that's been around 4 or 5 or 6 p.m.
That sounds like a very nice day, especially guys, again, plugging the keto brick. It's amazing. It's got real food. It's not a bunch of crap additives that you would get by getting some of these keto things over in the grocery stores. So check that out as well. Excuse me. So something that I recently heard from another person out on the internet was about how the ketogenic diet is, I don't believe this, by the way, but I want to get your take, is that the ketogenic diet is bad for testosterone levels, like actually lowering them. I really disagree with that vehemently, because I know for myself, I feel great, 48 years old, and I can definitely do a lot of the same things I could do in my 20s. What is your experience and your knowledge on the ketogenic diet and testosterone levels?
So I've never really had crazy high tests anyways. Like my numbers are all around usually between like 500 and 700 total tests, which is nothing astronomical. That's pretty, average as far as a guy my age. The weight training can help improve that. Not having a bunch of xenoestrogens in your diet and lifestyle can also help improve that. As far as the ketogenic diet itself goes, when people do a cut with very low dietary fat, which is typical when they're doing a bro diet or if it fits your macros, flexible dieting, they take their total fat very low. That's going to have a drastic negative impact on hormonal health. So I've done that in the past. I don't want to do that going forward. I haven't done that since adopting a ketogenic diet. And I think not doing that allows my hormones to stay much more stable. Now, in the context of a maintenance intake or surplus, I'm not sure exactly how a ketogenic diet would compare against a diet full of carbohydrates. People that are not yet fully fat adapted are going to experience a stressed state when they first start a ketogenic diet because their body is familiar with eating carbohydrates. They remove those entirely. There's a lag effect there for that body to adapt to that change. So temporarily, they're going to be in the sympathetic state more frequently, and that's going to likely result in a temporary dip in testosterone. Now, what they're foregoing by going keto may counteract that and actually improve their testosterone. So like if they're going from a standard American diet, they're eating a bunch of crap foods with a bunch of inflammatory, ingredients, that's also going to have a negative effect on testosterone. So if they remove that, who's to say what's going to overpower what there? But generally speaking, if people are consuming ample calories, not chronically under eating, consuming enough dietary fat, weight training, and getting enough sleep, rest, and recovery, they should have a pretty healthy total testosterone level.
Okay, thank you. Talking about weight training for bodybuilding, life in general, anything else like that, time is always of the essence for a lot of people. I know I've been talking about time a lot, but I understand that that's seriously an issue for a lot of folks. Walk us through like your typical workout. Are you like in the gym in and out like a high intensity type guy, or is it more volume, or just somewhere in the middle? What is your day like in the gym?
So I've been doing full body for the past 6 months or so, and I actually really like it. I've always kind of talked shit about full body, but I've actually been playing around with it and I kind of like it. So I do 5 days a week, full body, at least one exercise per muscle group every single time I train. And I'm normally operating in the 8 to 12 rep range. Some of my movements, like today, I did sumo deadlift, for instance, as my predominant leg movement. And I started at 135, added 25 on each side. So 185, then 225, then 275, then 315, then 365, then 405, then 455. So quite a few sets there for sumo. And I, was doing about 8 to 10 reps on each of those sets. So I'll oftentimes go beyond 4 sets, but most of my exercises are in the 4 to 5 set rep or scheme there.
Okay, sounds. And then as far as like, do you ever take any sets to failure, or what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I oftentimes go to failure when I'm really trying to push the envelope. I'll typically pick one exercise per day that I really want to go to failure on. Like today when I did sumos, for instance, I felt my form starting to break. I did all those sets, progressively getting heavier with the weight, pyramiding up in weight, and I finished with 455 for 10 reps. If I was to have done an 11th rep, I could have gotten it up, but my form would have broken and I wouldn't have been like I would have risked unnecessary injury. So that was pretty much to failure there. And I like doing that on the last set of some of these, primary compound movements.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So for some folks who don't know, you back in the day when you first started your bodybuilding, or you did eat a different kind of diet.
Mhm.
Could you walk us through what led you to going into the ketogenic diet? Because you also did this back in the day when the internet wasn't even as much of a resource as it is now.
Yeah. So my first competition was in 2012. And at that time, I was doing kind of like a bro diet, but I honestly just didn't know what I was doing. I'd find things on bodybuilding.com. I'd look at magazines, and I was eating, 5, 6 meals a day, but they were just incredibly small meals. I was cutting calories, doing obsessive amounts of cardio, and I went from 230 to 153 in a matter of 12 weeks for that
Holy
first
cow.
competition.
Okay.
So I lost a ton of muscle in the process, lost a ton of fat, obviously, but a ton of muscle. And it was not sustainable. And that's what honestly led to my disordered eating tendencies, which lasted for several years. So that is far, far, far from optimal. From there, I competed in 2015, following a similar approach, a little bit more measured, but still, not a ketogenic diet, and also still struggling with eating disorders. And then after those shows, I decided to had to find something better, something more sustainable for me. So I just did carbohydrate backloading, which was basically keto during the day and then high glycemic index carbs at night. And then I found that I felt better without the high glycemic index carbs. So I just removed those and was doing carb backloading without the carbs, which pretty much lo and behold is keto. Again, this was before keto was popping. This was back in 2015, I believe. So there wasn't any products on the market. There wasn't any really books, podcasts, or resources about keto, but I felt better without the carbs. So I just continued to train without the carbs, playing around with proteins and fat intake and different foods. And then I competed in 2017 with that ketogenic approach. And that's when I got my pro card status.
Outstanding. Um, we're both natties. You started bodybuilding at a much younger age, where, I mean, when I started it, my days of dethroning Chris Bumstead already left me about 20 years ago. But when you started at a young enough age where, and you have the genetics for it, because you had a great physique even as a natty, right? So you could have gone like into the IFBB type of stuff. What was the reason for you to stay as a natural?
Honestly, man, I just want to see my body's capable of. Like, people don't give their body enough credit. I mean, it's truly an amazing system, and it can do so much more than people give it credit for. I mean, I've continued to get better every single year. So many people start saying, "Hey, look, you've reached your muscle building potential after 4 or 5 years of weight training," which is just so far from the truth. You can continue to get better and better as long as you're giving your body reason to get better and better, implementing progressive overload, having ample recovery time, getting your nutrition dialed in, focusing on mobility and flexibility and making sure you're not risking injury. So if you do that, you'll just keep getting better. And bodybuilding, especially natural bodybuilding, is kind of an old man sport. Like you see a lot of people that go pro in their later years. I'm 31 this year, and I have every intention of the world of continuing to compete well into my 40s, 50s, 60s. Like there's no reason I shouldn't compete.
Sounds good. Well, it'd be cool to share the stage with you one day and just hand me the first place trophy, by the way, when that happens. Just
Yeah,
heads up. What show is it you're competing for, training for?
So I actually just went through my competitive schedule for this year, and I've got 5 shows currently on the calendar. So a pretty busy year. That's more than I've ever done in one season before, but I'm going freaking all out this year. So I've got 5 shows, and honestly, like I don't my peak weeks are very healthy. They're very sustainable. So it's not like I'm asking too much of my body that I'm not asking of it during a normal week. So I don't think the 5 shows will be too taxing in that regard. They'll be taxing in regards to the travel. I mean, I've got shows in Washington and New York and Massachusetts. They're all over the place. So I'm just going to be, traveling machine there towards the latter half of the year. But my first show is the first weekend in September.
Okay. You should move to Ohio, man, because we got bodybuilding shows basically right in our backyard, and the weather's great here in Cleveland, so you should just do that now.
Yeah, just come here. We could train together.
Right. Hey, so something that we've talked about in the past when I was on your show a while back, and we were talking about like TRT and people in the natural bodybuilding space being on TRT. What is your take? I know I mentioned my take on your show. What is your take on that with people being on TRT yet still going into the natty shows?
So I typically compete in the INBF, WNBF Federation, and they don't allow. That's kind of it is the strictest natural bodybuilding federation that I'm aware of. Like they have the longest banned substance period. Like you can't be taking any of this stuff for 10 plus years. They're really, really strict. Their banned substance list is exhaustive, almost too exhaustive in some ways. But when it comes to, TRT, like I totally get the argument as to why somebody would want to take that, just improve overall health and well-being as they age for sure. But from a bodybuilding standpoint, it certainly does give them a competitive advantage. Simply think about it like this: as a natural athlete, even for me at 31, my total testosterone, my free testosterone is going to drop as I go through a prep. Like it's just going to happen. It's certainly not optimal from a health standpoint, but it is the reality of the sport. Now, if I were to be taking TRT and just simply maintain a higher baseline of circulating testosterone throughout my prep, even if it wasn't to supra physiological levels, if it was still just simply a high baseline, level, that's still going to give me an advantage over the competitors that are not doing that. So I wouldn't feel right about going that route. So I think it makes sense from a natural bodybuilding standpoint that they don't allow TRT, but there are certain instances in natural bodybuilding where they may be, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like there's a lot of vitamins and minerals that are outlawed in the sport. And it's like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm all about optimizing human performance and health. And if there are things that are not necessarily leading to increased muscle growth, strength, and hypertrophy, but can simply let you live better, longer, more, effectively, those shouldn't be outlawed. So, they're kind of getting a little too extensive with the banned substance list in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah, I saw one DHEA. I don't even know what that necessarily is. I just remember reading it on like some maybe bodybuilding.com. That was supposed to be some sort of supplement that can help with free testosterone. And then lo and behold, some of the organizations that I've wanted to compete in, you can't have had touched that stuff in about 7 years. And I was like, oh, well, shoot, I guess I'm not going to be doing that one anytime soon because I used to use DHEA. I don't even remember how long it's been since I've used it, but I probably have to wait about another 2 or 3 years before I can compete in some of those. And like you said, it's like, well, that's, buy that at GNC for goodness sakes. It's kind of seems a little silly to ban something like that. What are some supplements that you think people should take, bodybuilders or not, to help with overall health, especially testosterone production and just anything else for older men?
Like creatine, that one's not banned. So like simple creatine monohydrate would be worthwhile, making sure Your vitamin D3 levels are all up to date, or up to par. Vitamin K2, just the simple, basic vitamins and minerals, ample electrolytes. Obviously, when it comes to testosterone specifically, I've been trying to increase mine. I just started taking a supplement called Long Jack. It's like there's several different names for it, but it's basically just an herb, and it's supposed to naturally increase total testosterone levels and or minimize sex hormone binding globulin. So like if you have high total testosterone, but your sex hormone binding globulin is also high, that's going to minimize your free test, and the free test is what really matters more so than your total testosterone. So making sure you're testing for your SHGB or SHBG to see what that level is, and if it's too high, working to kind of minimize that is also key.
Okay, outstanding. What would you give advice for somebody who's wanting to start competing in bodybuilding?
Honestly, man, just it kind of depends where they're at. Like if they're a newbie in the sports, they've never really trained before, they're young, like they don't want to go right into a deficit and lean out for a show. Like especially if they don't have an obsessive amount of body fat to lose. Like when you are first starting working out and you're young and you've got that high circulating free testosterone, you're going through puberty, all those things. Like the last thing you want to do is hinder your quote unquote beginner gains by going into a deficit. So making sure that you don't transition to a deficit until after you've been doing it for quite some time is key. I mean, I put on 20 pounds my first year of working out because my body had never been subjected to that stimulus before. So when I subjected it to weight training, it grew quite rapidly. But that doesn't last forever. Like that's a very fleeting phenomena. So allowing yourself to capitalize on it while it's there as an opportunity is key. And then after you've been doing that for a few years, have developed some muscle maturity, have put your body under that stress load, then you can start playing around with the idea of competing and actually transitioning to a deficit. And then when you reach that point, just freaking go for it. Like don't wait for you to have the perfect physique, because that is an ever elusive thing to obtain. Like I'll never have the perfect physique that I want. I mean, it's always on the horizon, it's always on the cusp, but you get better every year as long as you're doing it in a healthy way.
So how long is your preps now? I mean, are you still doing the 12-week preps, or have you made them go longer?
Yeah, I don't do any more 12-week preps. Like my preps now are usually 5 to 6 months, sometimes longer. Like the prep I'm in now, I started in April, beginning of April, and the last show is mid-November. So that's a long, very long prep.
7 months right there. Okay. And so how do you keep track to make sure you're going in the right direction with your preps?
So I track everything, man. I track my macros, my intake. I check my stats, so my body fats, my measurements, how I'm looking in the mirror. I take consistent progress pictures every 2 weeks. I just make sure that things are moving in the right direction. I'm also tracking my blood work, so I'll probably be getting a comprehensive lab panel for thyroid, hormones, lipids every 3 months for sure, if not more frequently. I'm just testing that every single, week, depending on how things are going. Like my body stats, I'm testing every 2 weeks. My pictures are every week. And then blood work, I said, is every month to 3 months. So I'm just tracking everything throughout the entire process to make sure everything is trending where I want it to.
And what would be a reason for those who are going to ask the question in the comments, possibly? What would be the reason for doing the blood work during a contest prep? What are you looking for there?
I just want to be able to quantify how much of an impact this is having on my hormonal health, more so than anything. And also, I'm kind of curious to see what it does to my lipid markers, but more so, I'm doing it for the hormone panel, because no matter what diet you're following, you are going to decrease your testosterone. It's going to have an impact on your estrogen, your estradiol, like all these things, male or female. So being able to quantify that with tangible numbers as I go through the prep and then manipulate macros is very insightful to me. And I think it'll be great for me to be able to show people firsthand how doing so with a ketogenic diet while maintaining relatively high levels of dietary fat is going to be superior from a hormonal health standpoint. Now, I'm only going to be able to have myself as the N of one. So in order to truly compare, I'd have to have a clone of me go through it and also take these same panels while following a carbohydrate-based diet. So I'm not going to have that data. But many people have gone through a prep doing a carbohydrate-based diet. They know how they feel. They feel like zombies towards the end. So if I can bypass that by eating a ketogenic diet, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. And well, now we're talking about carbohydrates. Do you do anything different with your prep during, well, some people do during peak week, they might deplete themselves all that time as far as carbs are concerned. But then come peak week, they're starting to pump in carbs for veins or whatever it might be. Do you do that, or how do you do your peak week?
I do not do that at all. Like I'm strict keto through and through the building phase, through the cut, through the reverse diet, all out. And there's a couple of reasons I don't do it. From a psychological standpoint, actually, we'll talk about psychological last. From a physiological standpoint, as you become more fat adapted, your body's ability to replenish muscle glycogen improves. And it's also better at abstaining from using muscle glycogen. So from a strictly glycogen based standpoint, you are not going to be depleting your glycogen fully and then not replenishing it. Like that's just not how it works. Your body's able to do that in the absence of carbohydrates. So I'm not really worried about taking a bolus of carbohydrates to try and ramp up my glycogen stores because that's already pretty well capped out. So I don't need to do it for that reason. Also, when it comes to peak week, I don't like to introduce a whole bunch of new variables. So if I've done my entire prep with a strict ketogenic diet, leveraging fat and protein, the last thing I want to do is introduce carbohydrates because I don't know how my body's going to respond to it. And I could get it dialed in and know exactly how my body's going to respond to it, but I don't see a benefit to it because if you overshoot the carbs, mess up the electrolyte intake, you'll spill over, you'll be able to wash out all your definition because you have more fluid in your subcutaneous layer of skin. So you'll wash out your definition, you'll lose your vascularity. And I don't want to have to go through the crazy water cutting, water loading, electrolyte, depletion phases. Like it's not necessary to do that and also peak properly. In the past, and what I've done going forward, or what I will do going forward, is pretty much mirror my normal week, but then I'll introduce a ketogenic caloric refeed, which is a bolus of fat and protein and sodium. And that increase in sodium above baseline draws any subcutaneous fluid I have and forces it into the muscle tissue itself. So my skin's going to appear thinner, my muscles will appear fuller, I'll have more vascularity, and I can do all that while staying fully hydrated. All of the water, not all of it, but most of the water in your system is in your muscle tissue, in your brain, in your organs. Like you don't want it in your subcutaneous layer of skin, but you want water. So simply dehydrating yourself and cutting water is the last thing you want to do.
I saw that a lot in the shows I've done where these guys are just not just taking little sips of water, and I've never even thought about doing that to myself. I'm not going to destroy my organs just for the trophies that are behind me. And I know for me, the staying low carb has helped me not have to do the water fasting or anything like that, or deplete my water to the point of dehydration at all. Is there something like, so for bodybuilding, what do you take out of bodybuilding that you think is great for people just for overall health?
Honestly, man, work ethic, discipline, and consistency. Like you can kind of that can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. But I mean, like with bodybuilding specifically, it is the epitome of consistent, disciplined action. Like I have literally eaten the exact same thing every single day for the past, 4 weeks now without fail. And that has already led to some pretty significant progress, having not dropped my calories that low. The thing is, people they're always wanting to flirt the line, see what they can get away with. Rather than seeing what you can get away with in life, see what you can optimize for. And if you remove all the variables, stay consistent with things and get things dialed in and push the envelope with the intensity factor, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So, bodybuilding perfectly embodies all of those character traits. And then once you see success with bodybuilding by doing those things, then you recognize that it spills over beyond the sport and can also apply to everything else you do in life.
Well, that leads me to the next thing. How has bodybuilding helped you create your brand and your company and basically the Robert Sikes that we know?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like it's well, the businesses were all kind of formed from my passion and love for bodybuilding and nutrition. Like I recognized that there was, opportunity to help people there. So I wanted to create a vehicle to provide value. Hence the content brand Keto Savage and the Keto Brick eventually were all born to do so. But then just like simply chipping away at those business tasks every single day, like I would chip away with my meal requirements, my nutrition, my training in the sport of bodybuilding, it all just compounds on itself and it grows into what it has now. So, knowing that if I put in the work, the success will come has been key in bodybuilding and also with business.
Something I saw, I think it was last year, was when we were still dealing with a lot of the, I don't want to say pandemic. We were still dealing with a lot of the pandemic stuff. You would come out with, well, one of the shirts that I keep telling myself I'm going to buy, and I just keep forgetting. Now after we're off the show, I'm going to buy it if it's still available. You have a faith over fear product line on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came across that idea?
Yeah, so every year, and I have for the past several years now, I record a manifesto for the year. So last year, my manifesto was faith over fear. This year, my manifesto is discipline is destiny. But last year, with 2022, I mean, we had recently moved to the new location that we have. We were still going through all the issues with the pandemic. We had a lot of financial strain because of supply chain issues, cost of ingredients going up. There was just a whole lot of unknowns out there. And it was very easy for me and others, I mean, anybody really, to just feel very fearful of that uncertainty and then let that be the ruling factor in their life. And my mentality was, look, if I'm doing the work, if I'm hustling, if I'm working my freaking face off and doing everything that I physically can, mentally can, and emotionally can, then I just simply have to have faith that it's going to work. Otherwise, I'm going to beat myself into the ground for nothing. I try to take a very stoic approach to life. And if I was putting in the work and not, taking any shortcuts, then I just had to have faith that it was going to be all right. That's exactly what happened.
Outstanding. I like what you just said as well about discipline. Could you say that again? Discipline equals destiny, or discipline? What was that
Discipline is
again?
destiny. Yeah, discipline. I think I might like Ryan Holiday, amazing author. He wrote a book called Discipline is Destiny. So I used that for the manifesto, but I also want to put it on a shirt. So I may have to change it a little bit. So I might change that to Discipline Dictates Destiny.
I love that. So can you elaborate a little bit where where you're going with that as far as your manifesto, or is that we got to wait to the end of the year for you to put that out?
No, so I put the manifesto at the beginning of the year, like on the 1st
Okay.
of January. So basically, like with this year, 2023, I've got so many irons in the fire, so to speak. I've got the business, I've got multiple businesses. I've got, a new son, Rigel. I've got my wife. I've got another business slash course that I'm in the process of building out and hopefully we'll be launching soon. And then I've got multiple conferences. I've got like several conferences this year that I'm speaking at or we have a booth at. And then I've got multiple competitions, 5 competitions tentatively on the schedule. In order for me to excel, not just simply do, but actually excel at those endeavors, I have to be the most disciplined I've ever been. So discipline dictating my destiny is key there. And I don't want to just simply show up. Like I'm going there to, kill. I'm going there to kill the competition. I'm going there to kill it with business. Like I am not simply there as an attendee. I am there to rock and roll. And I mean, my training goal, my physical goal with bodybuilding this year is to become the leanest man alive. Like not just simply be the leanest man on stage and compete and win, but like be the leanest man on freaking planet Earth at that point in time. So I can't achieve these high, lofty goals if I'm skirting my responsibilities when it comes to discipline.
Outstanding. I have to tell you, Rob, it's watching you over the years has definitely been motivating. And I remember like when I get up on the treadmill to do my cardio, I would just put on your stuff. I found you quite by accident. Just went, youtube.com, and I was like, ketogenic natural bodybuilding. You were one of the first people that popped up. And it's been awesome watching your journey. Where can other people follow you? Obviously, I just said YouTube, but what other avenues can people find you?
Yeah, man. So all things Keto Savage, ketosavage.com, Keto Savage on social, the book, ketogenicbodybuilding.com, the course. I might change the URL, but right now it's ketocontestprep.com. It's just a landing page. I haven't launched it yet. But yeah, man, all things Keto Savage, Keto Savage podcast, all that good stuff.
Outstanding. All right. Well, I have to thank you real quick. You just said that you've been doing all of these other things. So the fact that you took the time to come on the show means a lot to me, brother. Thank you very much. I know that you have your live Q&A thing coming up, guys. Uh, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. He's over in the Central, so 5 p.m. on his time zone. You get on, look up Keto Savage on Instagram or YouTube. Excuse me, even on Facebook. Him and his wife typically go live right at that time. They do some Q&A. It's always a great time. So, and it's always a wealth of information. you're missing out if you don't check it out. So be sure to check that out. And excuse me, I'm sorry. Rob, thank you so much for coming on board, and I will talk to you again very soon.
Hey man, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I've said multiple times, man. Like you give me a platform, you are my oxygen. You give me support. You've supported me from day one. So I mean, I'm always happy and blessed to come on your show because I just want to pay it forward, man. I owe you so much.
Well, thank you, brother. That's an honor that you say that. I will talk to you again very soon.
Take care, bud.